Hey everyone, it's John here from Hot Take Hockey, back with another video. We're going to talk about the Leafs and the goaltending situation. Obviously, going into the new year, Samsonov and Woll were the tandem, but a lot of conversations after seeing Samsonov after the first couple of games and just talking about the Leafs needing a legit starting goalie. I mean, I'll just say right off the bat, you could argue that point right away, seeing some of the goalies that have won the Stanley Cup recently, kind of like the Vegas Golden Knights going through all those goalies and winning with Adin Hill. So it's a conversation to be had that you don't necessarily need like that all-star starting goalie. And I think a lot of people would say Saros, as it is already overrated. I don't know if I go to that extent. I think Saros actually, if Nashville does anything this year, I think he could be a Hart candidate. I think he's going to be that valuable. Obviously, I think Saros at sometimes has played behind a pretty solid defense in Nashville, but I think that's been inconsistent. And obviously, they've had their injuries too. So I think Saros, this one here, Hockey Machine, I think if you're looking at Saros 50% retained in this package, I don't hate it for the Leafs perspective, just in terms of like you giving yourself 2 years of a solid window with a legit goalie, like Saros and net. Then if you can go get a solid defenseman to play, obviously, with Riley and then offset with Brody on the second pair, whoever's there. But Robertson, who may need a change of scenery at some point, first round pick. Niemela, I don't love giving up Niemela in this trade. I'd rather just like throw a third round pick in here if that's possible. So like if there was a deal structured around like Samsonov, Robertson, a first and second or first and third, if the Preds were willing to retain a mil or two off of Saros, I don't know if they necessarily need to go all the way to 50%, which is 2.5, but Saros is on a great deal, only $5 million for this year and next. But if you look at other scenarios here, people on Cap Friendly, these are not my trade proposals as well, but I mean, if you find a scenario where you're trading Brody as well, I want the Leafs to keep Woll. I think you got to see Woll through. I think he's been a guy that's developing pretty well at his age, and I think as Woll gets closer to his later 20s, I think he's going to be a pretty solid 1B option for the Leafs. But I have seen the Carter Hart option. I mean, I've talked about it in the past, but this is not bad. I mean, I would prefer Samsonov just to offset the cap here, but you could also look at Hart and Samsonov as a pretty good tandem to go into the playoffs potentially. But I think if the Leafs get to that scenario where you're at the deadline, you're right in the race, you're tight in a race, maybe you do make a trade like this. But maybe it's Robertson, Samsonov, and a pick for Hart. Maybe that's a lot, but if you're more confident in a guy like Hart long-term than Samsonov, we'll see. But I do think Hart, his IQ and just comfortability in the net, I feel higher on than Samsonov. I think Samsonov is a very good like athletic goalie, and I think he does make some big saves. And obviously, I mean, he's the first goalie in a while to win a round for Toronto. So there's a lot of possibilities here. I mean, ignore this bottom one. I don't know what this guy's on about, but big blockbuster with Nashville in the works. I mean, like I said, I think it could be a lot more simple in terms of like Samsonov, a prospect, first round pick, second round pick. And then you go for a guy like Saros, and maybe Nashville retains to offset the cap. But maybe Yarncrow makes a return to Nashville. I could see a scenario like that. If you package Samsonov, Yarncrow, draft pick, prospect, then you get Saros. I could see a deal like that. I think Toronto should go after a guy like Saros, and I think Nashville should trade a guy like Saros, especially in the kind of point they are with their franchise moving to a new scenario. I don't think you need a guy like Saros to just end up doing what Winnipeg did with Hellebuck here, because I think Jets fans would agree with me. Signing Hellebuck to that long-term deal, especially with kind of mixed feelings on where you are as an organization, I think Nashville's in that similar sense. You've got a lot of young guys coming. You have Askarov in the system. I think if you didn't have Askarov in the system, this is a different conversation, but you do. And I think trading for a guy like Samsonov and maybe going towards a tandem of Askarov and Samsonov, or if they're going for Woll in this trade, I think it makes sense. You give Askarov that path to the NHL versus having Saros as the guy kind of in the way. So give me your thoughts, guys, on the potential Samsonov. We'll see. Maybe it's Woll, like I said, but potential Saros to Toronto is where I'm at. So going back to this, could we see this scenario potentially? Because Samsonov is a UFA at the end of the year, and if there's not confidence that he'll be back with Toronto at a reasonable deal, maybe you consider something like this, and maybe he finds a better home. And a tandem with Askarov, you get 2 Russian goalies in a tandem, maybe comfortability there, and then Saros finds a home in Toronto. Again, it's spitballing, but there are rumors in the past that suggest that Toronto has had interest in Saros. Would Trey Living have the interest? We'll see. So, as I said, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit that like button and definitely comment down below what you think on this trade, and have some notification bells on if you want to get notified when I go live as well. All right, guys, have a good one. Peace.